understand how much £1 trillion is. Literally Google what is £1 trillion versus $1 million and see visually how much money that is. And if you look at what they're doing now, and now we're up to a 4-year cycle where they're going to have to print more money to service the interest on the payments that they've remade, that there's only one way house prices are going to go, whether it's this year or in 5 years' time.
How to be a successful property developer? To answer that question, I'm joined today by my special guest, Stuart Wyeth. Stuart Wyeth started off as a builder, and he has built more than 2,500 lofts before he became a property developer. So he knows exactly how to play the construction game and get this construction side of property developing right. And that's what we're going to cover in this podcast. So stay tuned for more. Stuart, thanks for joining me.
How you doing, Ranjan? Lovely. What a pleasure to be here.
And it's
Big
great
fan.
to have you because you've done so much. I mean, you've ran Sky Lofts, built 2,500 lofts for other people, and then came on the property commercial conversion course that we run.
Yep.
And decided that, hey, you want a bit of the property developer action.
Definitely. I think the first thing was getting the confidence to do the property development. And I think the training course, jumping straight in, was the missing piece I needed to have the confidence to go and buy a big, redundant, vacant building, a commercial property. In my world, a commercial developer was someone who drove around in a big Rolls Royce, has got millions of pounds that they can just buy in cash. And that was the missing piece to realise that I could buy a commercial property, carve it up into flats essentially, and not be stuck with a big vacant building that you have to do a laser quest with or indoor, go-karting track or something that's not going to work for property. So residential was the way forward. And very excited to be here.
Okay, so you were very successful with Sky Lofts. You systemised it and had it really down pat how to convert or build a loft on top of a house, basically. What was it? What was the driver for you that said, well, I want to be a developer, and particularly commercial buildings?
Well, when 2020 come, up until that point, I was looking at trying to build the first national loft conversion company. So we're very systemised. We still build about 65 lofts a year. So we run that in conjunction with the property development side. But since 2020, we decided to pivot into HMOs first. We built and bought 4 HMOs in the first year, and then I soon realised that I didn't really want to have hundreds of houses, which is great. HMOs are great for cash flow. I'd rather have sort of blocks of units of sort of 9 to 20 units under one roof. So I needed to learn how to buy the commercial property. So I've done the course, learned that missing part, and we've recently finished a 9-unit scheme. We've got a scheme in Farnham, which is a 7 2-bed unit scheme. And for me, it was about the cash flow. We never want to sell, want to hold it, keep it long term, and enjoy the passive income that it produces.
You're right, because HMOs are great for getting started. House in multiple occupations, low barriers to entry. You can build up some cash flow quick, but the more you own, the more the management headache increases. Whereas the commercial conversion route is what we call the commercial CMO, commercial unit in multiple occupation.
Absolutely.
If you convert a building into 9 flats, it's let and forget because they're single let flats,
got their own bills,
with no communal areas as own bills, and you don't have that management.
Exactly.
headache.
And I think that the loft conversion experience, 22 years of doing conversions on residential developments, it wasn't that much of a step to go into the commercial to resi stuff. And we started with the houses because it was low risk. Mm-hmm. I pretty much learned everything I needed to do about HMOs on YouTube, as most people do. And then, soon realised that I could do this for 100 units or more. And I thought it'd be a lot more easier in 10 years' time to manage blocks of units. So that was like the next step, really. The commercials, the development stuff that I've got a background in and feel quite comfortable building is definitely quite a strong bow to my armory, or string to my bow. Working with all our contractors as well, we work with them full time. So to bring them out of the residential stuff and into the commercial as and when they're needed works really good hand in hand.
Now, we always preach buy to hold.
Yep.
Because if you can buy the property and you can exit with most of your money back, hopefully all of it in certain circumstances, then why wouldn't you keep that building of converted flats for cash flow for life? That's what you do as well. I mean, that strategy resonated with you as opposed to sell on.
Well, in 2020, money was free, and I had a property I bought right at the peak of the financial crisis. And I'd sort of left it. Circumstances changed. I moved out the house and I let it to families. Fortunately, it's in an area where schools are really good. So people move in for like 5-year stints while the kids are going through the senior school play, and so I've had less tenants to worry about, and they sort of make it their family home. But in 2020 I refinanced it, and I bought it in 2007 for like 300 grand, and refinanced it in 2020 for 650 grand, and I've done nothing. It took none of my bandwidth, none of my time, and I released that cash to do one of the first HMOs we done, and that really was the sign that holding this stuff longer term is where the real wealth's created. If you're buying and selling, you're using a lot of energy to make a few hundred grand. Yes, it's a lot of money if you're doing smaller things, but by holding it for 10 years plus, you're going to be making £1 million out of 200 grand if you sold it today.
When you stop, the income stops, but when you stop and you've bought and hold and you've done that for a period of years, it keeps on going forever.
You can refinance it, which is tax free. It's debt. So not that my plan is to refinance everything. Obviously, inflation's a big issue. It's going to keep going up. It's happened for 100 years. But having cash in the bank is really the worst thing you can do at the moment. If you've got 100 grand today in the bank, next year, with 10% inflation like last year, your buying power is now 90 grand. So that's what really our pitch to our investors is that rather than have cash in the bank, invest in an income producing asset. And fortunately, the size of schemes we're doing now, it does allow us to get all our money out and some, and we managed to get a bit of a capital raise to put towards new deals together, but ultimately they get their money back and they get an income producing asset, and they appreciate from the 10-year hold that we hold together.
Let's have a look at the first commercial project that you did, because you found this deal while you were on the 8-week commercial conversion course that we do, and you presented this building on one of our deal analysis clinics, which was a Boots building.
Yes.
So you can see it on screen now as it was. Talk us through what you saw in that Boots, what the building was, and what you saw was the potential in it.
So what I saw is a secondary parade in a town that was very close to where I live, and it wasn't really advertised online at all. And just by learning, by doing the course and sort of opening my eyes up to what was possible, I saw this 3-story building, or ground floor with 2 floors above. It had a Savills sign which was quite worn down. It might have been vacant for maybe 4 or 5 months. Savills weren't really pushing it because it's in sort of a lower area, I suppose. It's outside the M25. It's still £400 a square foot GDV, but very hard to find online unless you really search for it. So I rang up Savills and said, is it available? I saw the depth and the size of it, but when you actually went in the building, when it was built, it was very dark, very deep, and it didn't really lend itself to residential. But because we work in loft conversions, we're always working around attics and spaces, and I've always wanted to be an architect from when I was 16. Working
that is very true, because a lot of these, you only have to think about any Boots store across the country. They're a typical store which sells product off the shelves, meaning the windows all at the front of the building. There's not much in the middle. There's a lot of depth. And it's all artificial light because they want to maximize the space for products, and they don't want lots of windows in the back for people to burgle and all the rest of it.
Exactly. And also on this building at the rear, it had a single-story outbuilding which took away all the light from the rear.
So that's a ground floor space. It's a 3-story building.
Yeah, 2 floors above ground.
What was that used for?
So upstairs, there's a staircase at the rear which joined the whole building together, which was just used for ancillary and storage, really. On the first floor, it was like office and some racking, and then on the top floor, it was just redundant. That hasn't been touched for sort of 60, 70 years or so.
So what people miss, I guess, with these projects is well, okay, it's dark and dingy. There's not enough natural light. You've got to punch in the natural light, isn't it? Talk us through what you learnt on the course in terms of sequencing planning applications with PD applications to get the outcome you wanted.
So first, as soon as we secured the building, we went straight in for a planning application, and we showed it just as offices as it was, but we just put in extra lights and some veluxes along these T sections, these extra veluxes along these little sloping roofs on the ground floor. Managed to get that through as we were securing the building as we completed, and the second we completed, we went in for the MA application originally for 7 flats and a shop at the front, but then as we got very little resistance from the council, we decided to reapply and go for 2 more flats, which we managed to squeeze in.
So was it a conservation area?
It wasn't a conservation, but it is an area of it's a special protected area. So even though MA is available, we spoke to the council and said, look, we want to turn this into residential, and they recommended we went in for a full planning application, but refer to the Class MA regulations and the rules. And I think that's the critical thing I got out of our training together, was actually understanding where Whitehall are going with the permitted development idea. Is you can still apply all that to your planning application, and I think that most of the towns and centres who are Article 4 or conservation or whatever will cause very least resistance, because they're sort of looking at these buildings to try and convert them into more residential flats.
Okay, so with this project, The end game is basically to create a bunch of nice flats that you can keep to hold for the long term. Talk us through some of the figures. Purchase price?
Purchase price was, 400 grand, give or take a few pennies.
And end value of the 9 flats?
Just under 1.6 million.
And the cost to achieve that?
We spent around 650 grand, I think it was about that. But we went full green. So we went internal wall installation, hot water heat pumps to do hot water in every flat independently, load of solar panels where we've got like 8 just in the communal area. So we've got very little running costs, and the tenants that live there actually benefit from low running costs as well, which, we're in our second year now and we've only had one person move out, which is great. So yeah, we're hoping they'll stay for the long term.
Now, I've been to see this site. It's very, very impressive. And now you are focused on green and energy saving, but not because, well, I don't know whether you are an environmental sort of Greta Thunberg fruitcake or not, but talk us through the pounds and cents argument for doing it. Forget about whether you're a green nut, but there is a pounds and pennies argument for why you should do this.
There's a moral side.
Buy to a hold.
There's a moral side and a commercial side.
Forget about the moral side. Just give us the pound and pennies. Why developers?
Well, you've got to put heating systems in anyway.
Yeah.
So why would you not spend an extra 2 or 3 grand and actually add value to the property? So you can put a gas boiler in and you can do it for 3 or 4 grand, or you can spend 6 or 7 and put in a hybrid system, which means not only can you cut the gas out completely, which saves you on your standing charges. Last time I looked, I think it's like 45p a day now just for the standing charge of having gas in a building. So the first thing we do is cut the gas off and then do an all electric system.
Yes.
If there's a surface area for roofs and the council aren't going to complain, then let's put as many solar panels as possible, because the value is at the end when you do come to refinance, they value that as a better asset than ones without.
That is the point, isn't it? So what sort of EPC ratings are you getting on your flats?
At the moment, we've done commercial to resi in Victorians only, Victoria properties. So we're looking at getting Cs on them. This was when the EPC was going to become a bit more of a problem in 2025. Yeah. They've pushed that back, but ultimately it's coming. Yeah. So I don't see the reason why we would then go back from our systems. We're calculating all the costs now. We understand it per unit.
But if you can get EPCs of Bs or so, some lenders will give you better rates and better terms.
A to C, you'll get a better lending rate. It's very difficult to get a B with using electric at the moment, the way they do the EPCs. But when they do change that, because air source heat pumps and putting in electric systems is deemed a lot worse than having a gas boiler. So there is going to be a point at which that does change, and which then all our properties. But ultimately, the end game for us, if we keep our stock for 10 years plus and we decide to sell all of our properties to like a REIT, a real estate investment trust, they're going to view our portfolio of properties a lot more favourably than other stock that they could buy.
But have you discovered that the fact that your tenant finds bills cheaper means that they stay longer?
Yeah, definitely.
And they value being in that property more, which means you have less voids. And also, if you've got a more energy efficient home that's going to cost them less, if it costs them £100 less in bills, then paying £30 more in rent is not bad trade-off.
50 quid a month. 60 quid a month compared to competitors or other stock that's out there. It just means they have a better experience. And we not only go green, we actually design them like it was a purpose-built block of flats. I'll avoid buildings in the future which aren't designed to have flats built in them, or if they're too quirky, there's too many angles, it doesn't feel like a flat. So everything we do, we try and make sure that it feels like a flat. It's low energy bills. People enjoy living in our properties, and hopefully the end result will be that people stay for the extra year, 18 months, 2 years longer than they would have normally planned if it was just a normal one bed flat. What
were your key lessons learnt from this Boots project, which was your first project as a developer?
It was, yeah. Love the fact that the size of it, and the fact that we've got all 9 under one title. When we were doing it, Liz Truss was in office, rates were going through the roof, consecutive rate hikes and all the rest of it, and we managed to secure it on a 4.99% on 5 years, but all under one title. Where having the time again, I may have looked at it and gone, right, let's carve it up into 9 separate titles and not got this multi-discount blanket put on top of our mortgage. It's great moving forward because it means we've got one mortgage and one insurance to deal with, but it means that we had to leave about I think it's about 80 or even 80 or 90 grand in the deal. But when you've got a building that's bringing out 50 grand a year in positive profit, it doesn't take long to get your cash out. So that was a lesson learned there, which I didn't know was available. So I'd have maybe got on with that a bit earlier. And the other thing is services is a bit of a killer. So we were right at the end of this secondary parade, which has had a lot of development done already. And I didn't pay for a electrical surveyor to work out the exact amount of wattage or whatever it was, kilowatt hours that we needed to run the building, because we over-egged it because of these hot water heat pumps. And the electricity board, after waiting 8 weeks for the right quote, come back at like 65 grand. We had like a 30 grand budget in the cost for it, not knowing what these things were going to cost. And then it was worth reapplying, so paying about 400 quid to get an electrical surveyor to do it properly. We then reapplied, had to wait another 4 weeks for the latest quote, and it come back at just about 35, 36 grand. So that was a lesson learned, which I think I would have rather done that up front and not lost a month, 6 weeks. It means nothing now. This was a year and a half ago, but at the time that was, I wanted to get it refinanced, pay back the investors. It was just another pressure that I would have probably not put myself under.
Now, I wanted to talk about the Farnham deal, which you did, which was very interesting. At first, came on my radar when it was featured on Property Elevator, and you can see a little clip on the video version of this. Now, it was presented to us as a commercial to residential conversion deal, and this is the classic, really, because I think they presented it to us with a certain vision for what it could be, and based on their vision of what it could be, the angels in the room weren't. I mean, he got an offer of funding, but to a maximum purchase price of about 800k.
Yeah.
You went along and subsequently picked it up and paid 400 grand more than any angel.
Half a million
quid
more.
more.
1.3. The story with
than
that
any
is,
angel, and still made a significant profit.
Yeah, so the story with that was it was hot property in Farnham, in this area. Farnham, for people that don't know where it is, it's a historic market town in the Surrey area of the UK. It's a lovely little town, and it's hot property. It's like a square in the middle. It's like a one-way system, and it's a scarce asset because there's only X amount of properties in this estate, in this little area. And we actually bidded. I bid when it was first on the market at the same time, just under £1 million, 995 with my investors at the time. And we didn't win it. Someone else won it for 1.1, who subsequently we bought it from. But they, when the times were pretty good, they bought it. They wanted to get an MA application and then either sell it on or build it out. And they were looking for a builder. So from one of the networking groups that we're all part of, I saw that someone put the address up to say, I'm looking for a builder in this estate. I recognised the address straight away. So WhatsApped him directly and asked for a meeting. We sat down and chatted, and we said, look, let's do it together. We'll provide the building costs and the expertise and build this out. We guesstimated about 700 grand for the build costs. They wanted 1.3 million pound for the building. So we said, let's join forces. We'll PG and work together, and then we'll sell it and make a profit and split whatever's there. And his investor got a bit nervous. Again, Liz Truss was in office, markets were going crazy, and that's the perfect time really to jump on these opportunities. And they decided after a week of negotiating, they just wanted to release it and sell it. And so they sold it to us for just over 1.31 million. And we took it on in
they had
September.
This had moved hands a few times, basically.
Yeah.
So all these guys had done, from their point of view, is added a little bit of PD.
Yep.
Got a scheme passed.
Well, they
for a
paid
certain
more than
number
everyone
of
else.
flats.
They paid more than everyone else, and they managed to secure like 6 months where they didn't really own it. They sort of could get the PD in the background while they exchanged, which was a clever move. But they bridged the cost when they bought it.
A very, very clever move. That's when you exchange subject to planning, or you can secure it with an option or whatever. So they secured it, so they didn't own it.
Yep.
They secured it. They got PD for, I think it was 7 flats, wasn't it?
It was 7 flats,
Seven
I think
flats.
4 1-beds and 3 2-beds, which was the other key part of this puzzle.
But they, from their point of view, they bought it for 9.9.
They bought it for 1.1.
1.1 and sold it for 1.3. So they made something out of it.
They paid 100 grand's worth of fees because obviously the bridging costs were there.
Oh, they
did buy it.
it.
They did buy it. Yeah, they didn't intend
yeah.
to. But what happened, I think, is that they were getting. I can't really remember what happened, but they had to buy it. They were originally going to do a back to back, but something couldn't happen, or something happened in the auction process that meant it fell through. So they had to then buy it on a bit of an emergency bridge. So they were in two minds whether just to sell it on, and they paid stamp on it now, or whether they wanted to build it out. They were looking for a builder, but the problem with the site is that they paid about 25 grand to a Reba architect, best of the best, to go in there and look at the scheme. And they only come up with 7 flats, but 4 were 1-beds and 3 were 2-beds, because the building had a basement, a ground floor, and then 2 floors above.
But sometimes these architects just aren't skilled in the type of outcome that you want to achieve as a developer.
Well, they're only as good as their instruction. So it's only as good as the developer who's asking them to prepare and design something. They're not instructed to really come up with the creative edge to try and maximize the value.
But that's the beauty of this commercial property. When you have a 3-bed semi, everyone knows what you can do with it. But it's like, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. With a commercial property, the NGDV is in your eyes.
Yeah, it's in your imagination.
Extent. So you can't conjure out profit out of nowhere. Basically, you were able to pay more, 1.3 million for this property, because you saw a different outcome to everybody else.
Yeah, so we weren't happy.
What was the outcome you saw?
So we knew they were making 200 grand than us, which on the first instance you think, they're screwing us. But ultimately, they had an architect go in there and design this scheme, and they used the basement to put the plant in, and then they had 3 floors above, which meant that there's different set of fire regulations to a 3-story building. They're putting in like communal heaters and boilers and stuff to run all the flats.
Oh, really?
Yes, they were using it as a fire. No, they were going to do it because I think there's some commercial benefits to do that. With tax and stuff, rather than have them all independent, which costs a bit more up front, but it's I think it's better long term if you're going to cut them up and sell them. Anyway, they were going to have this big communal boiler in downstairs. I think it's capital gains and stuff you can claim back if you do it that way. But we saw it, and just they were getting quotes in for like 850, 900 grand to do this work, which obviously meant it was too tight for their NGDV, which is about 2.6 million. So we looked at it, and when they decided they wanted to sell it, we agreed a price and we bought it. But ultimately, we've got our own in-house architect team. We looked at it within 5 minutes, said, why are they doing it this way? And the reason they only could get 4 1-beds in was because they had to create these lobbies, which is a fire regulation to create it over 4 floors. We knew from Amelie Place and the experience previously that if it's only 3 floors and we discounted the basement, then we could reclaim that lobby space, which meant that the values internally could become 7 2-beds. And we know that a 2-bed versus a 1-bed, it's at least another 100 grand, 120 grand on top of a 1-bed. So we could sort of build in and bake in another sort of 350, 400 grand's worth of GDV. So we could afford to pay a little bit more. And obviously by keeping the structural walls in play and not having to build these lobbies meant that we could bring our building costs down. So we're in for about 600 grand. We've spent 1.31. We actually bought the company, the shell company. They bought it through as well, so we only paid 0.5% of VAT stamp duty. Thank you. And it meant that we could build it more efficiently. And now we're getting the valuation done, but we assume the flats will be worth between 400 and 425 a flat because of the location.
I think the key thing here is that you're envisaging a different outcome. Like when it was showed on the property elevator show, we can only evaluate it based on the information we're presented. Yeah. We get the deal packs 10 minutes before the show, and it's whatever the pitcher has identified as the end value, because we've only given a certain amount of information. But when you're looking at it properly, particularly when you're looking at a site with existing permissions, you should actually go back to the drawing board.
Definitely.
And because you don't know whether the outcome that the person that instructed those plans, the outcome they were seeking is the same as the outcome you're seeking.
Yep.
So you've got to align it with that. And I think the other key thing that you mentioned is that a lot of architects are into space and design and all the rest of it. They often aren't into rental value maximization.
Yep.
And they also often do not have the full understanding of fire eggs, that they can get more space out of a flat unit by doing things slightly differently.
Yeah, I have 2 perspectives. One is a local perspective. So we knew that area was really in high demand. And I think there's some of the best schools in the country, which are 10 minutes away. So if we can get 2 beds, we actually come into, single parents with kids or couples with kids that would sacrifice a garden for 5 years to put their kids into school. And then the building perspective is really where our big strengths are, is looking at a building, making sure that we're building it the most efficient way as possible, where an architect won't have that view. And certainly having the fire eggs and having the extra space internally. This is an area of like 550, 600 pounds a square foot. So every square foot counts. And if we can make the design easier, make it easier to build and make it more valuable, then it's a bit of a win-win for us.
What motivates you? What's your grand plan?
I mean, it's not so much the money. When you do these developments, we don't really look at the profit being profit. So what we have to leave in 25% if we're going to refinance it. So I don't look at that 25% as profit. I look at what cash flow it's going to generate. And we're lucky enough that we've got Sky Lofts, which is a service-based business that pays for our in-house architects, our structure, and pays the salaries and pays the mortgage. But the property, it's exciting. It's like playing a real life game of Monopoly. You get to buy what you like. I have to be passionate and motivated to buy the stuff because it does exhaust you. It takes a lot out of you when you're in the depths of doing a development. But once it's finished and refinanced and it's bringing in 20, 30, 40, 50 grand's worth of cash flow, it doesn't take many for you to add that up together. And if you've got 10, 15 of them, why, I'm fairly young, fairly active and energetic. I want to just spend the next 10 years building as much as I can, adding lovely properties to my portfolio and something to leave my kids. I've got a 10-week-old at home and a 2-year-old. So I need to think about their future. And yeah, that's basically what keeps me motivated.
So what are the ingredients of the mindset of a successful developer?
Mindset. So, I mean, if I was to do a SWOT analysis on my own life, I think my strengths are my background. Since I was 16, working at B&Q, trying to understand what all the products were and what they were used for, through to wanting to be an architect to build skyscrapers in London. I think that I've sort of spent my whole life being around builders and being in the building industry, and which is the biggest risk of any developer. So having that as a strength is really good. The weaknesses, I think, are money. I think borrowing money. I didn't come from any money. My parents taught me to look after every pound and to not take bad debt. And I also sort of put bridging loans and debt finance into very much, loan sharks and that sort of pot where, one clause in a contract and they're going to take you for everything you're worth. So that was always a weakness of mine, is to get my mindset and mind in that. The opportunities at the moment is banks and commercial properties, which are 10 for a penny. I just love the fact that these banks are coming up, which it doesn't matter how privileged you are or how much money you've had in the last 200 years. These banks have never been for sale. So you could never get your hands on them.
That's
and
true.
Now we're buying 10 a penny. We're getting them for a good value per square foot in prime locations. Just secured a bank in Twickenham.
Most of them, the last time they changed hands was 30, 40 years ago.
Exactly. They sold them and done a sale and lease back, which we're buying from pension plans. And like the Boots buildings, all the pensions were having them when the time was right, but the time's changed. And now no one wants these big units in the middle of town centres. But so, I can't believe the values we're buying them, and the actual end, we can see the end values being a lot more than others would probably think, just by our skill set. So there's the opportunity. And then opportunity, I've got it. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Threats is the market, but the people don't really are sitting on their hands and not buying much. So if they're not buying much, they're not selling or purchasing properties or doing a lot. And our strategy isn't to sell. So actually we're using that to our strengths.
That's it. You mitigated the threat,
if
really.
markets drop by 10% and you're selling, I've got some developer friends who are struggling at the moment to sell stuff because people are sitting around waiting for interest rates to drop, where that was never our strategy. Our investors understand that if they put in £500,000 into a deal and we can only get them 350 back, then they're still, the main principle for our relationship is to get them exposed to property to create an income. So they're buying an income. And if they have to leave 100 to 200 grand in a deal, but the building's still worth 800 grand when we estimate it to be worth $1 million, they haven't lost the money. We just got to wait 10 years or 5 years to pull some money back out. So that really is, we're playing that to our strengths, and we're up against not as much competition as there would be at the height of a cycle, a buying cycle, where we're having to pay 10% more, and we can buy competitively. We're not up against the big boys because these sites are way too small for the big boys, but because they're sort of 10 to 20 unit blocks that we're trying to buy now, there's not that much competition out there that we're finding at the moment. And why the market's there and why we are where we are, we're just trying to buy as many as we can. So we're trying to buy at least another 3 or 4 banks this year.
That's an interesting point to pick up on, and I think it's worth people understanding this point. You've got the big developers, the Barratt Homes and all of that, and they're interested in hundreds of homes at one time. And a lot of these commercial buildings that we're talked about today, all of them, quite frankly, it's too small. It's too small beer for those guys. But then again, you've got the smaller time guy that's just done an HMO back to brick. He's too scared
to do the bigger stuff
of doing something slightly bigger. So there's this open goal of opportunity.
That's exactly where the mindset thing comes in, is that it took me 10 years to build the confidence to actually start my own loft conversion company. Yes, I've done 2,500 lofts, but Skylofts has done about 800 lofts now. So it took me 10 years to get the confidence to do my own thing, and then 10 years of running my own company to then get the confidence to go into commercial property, commercial to resi development. So it is a long-term play for myself to get over the fact, but now we're in it and we're doing it. It's actually not scary at all, and it's actually a lot easier. And if I'd done it 10 years ago, I'd be on a boat in the middle of the south of France by now. So
no, you wouldn't.
I probably wouldn't be.
Do it.
I'd be on my laptop and phone working, but I'd still be enjoying the
something.
sun. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I'll work forever because I love it. It's not really work when you enjoy every day. There is no Monday morning fear. It's not been.
So
that
would
for
you retire?
12 years. I'll never retire. No, I'm planning on taking a 10-month sabbatical off in 2026. My daughter will be almost 6 before she starts school, so I'm really gearing up to make sure this year and next year is my best years ever. So I can literally take 10 months off to effectively take her around the world. And if she wants to go camping for a month in France or go and see a volcano or feed the giraffes in Kenya, then we'll plan whatever she wants to do, because I think that's valuable time that not a lot of people can do, and I'm gearing up to make sure that I can do that solidly.
So share with our the viewers and listeners of this podcast the kind of things you're going to be focusing on to make the next 2 years the best 2 years ever.
So another fear of mine was to go into new build, because I don't really want to be a builder. 5 years from leaving my loft company that I was working for to starting Sky Loft, so I actually become a builder, and it's very hard to systemize. 1 minute you're digging holes, then you're putting scaffolding up, doing the foundations, then you're doing brickwork, steels, lintels. It's too clunky, and there's too many steps, and there's too many people that can let you down. So I'm trying to work on a new modular system, which I've actually located a fantastic UK company who have stocked panels in the UK that we can call upon, and we can start looking at areas inside town centres all across the country where we can knock them down, build these sort of Jenga houses, if you like, and build them in weeks or in days rather than weeks or months. And then once they're constructed, we can then start doing the conversion, which is where I feel super comfortable. So flat roof or pitch roof, tiles, electrics, plumbing, kitchens in, and clear site and go. So I've got this. I'm in an option at the moment where I've got a site which is perfect for it, and it's opposite our new office that we're now building. We're converting a bank from an old bank into 18 flats and a new office, which is going to become our headquarters. And then hopefully we're going to showcase one of these examples opposite, so we can bring in new money, new investors, councils, mayors, all people from different types of areas around the country.
Modular. I mean,
modular.
I mean, compared to traditional new build, I find permitted development a lot better because the building already exists and it's just internal conversions. Do you consider the modular type of building better than PD, or
I think there's
on
sites,
the same level?
There's sites within town centres that are not fit for purpose sites inside town centres, where I think as long as I can bring the councils on board, I know it sounds crazy, but we're trying to speak to some MPs now to try and get them to have a bit of a play on the PD, but for new builds. So we can take a site like an MOT garage or something that's sitting on a prime piece of real estate, local to the amenities, local to train stations and bus links and stuff, and actually look at the parking restrictions that would stop you taking a small parcel of land and creating a mass on it, which you have to create the mass, and 15, 20 flats on that piece of land. That means you can't get the parking for it. But by doing this means that, because you have to get it for the GDVs and the values to work to get the size, but it does mean that you can then bring in 20 to 30 more people to use the towns, revitalise the town centres and make them better places. Because all these big blue chips have come in, they've sucked all the energy out of these towns, and now they've moved into industrial estates outside of towns. It's sort of left a bit of a vacuum, and it definitely needs some attention, I think.
But a lot of the city centres these days, towns, they don't tend to have petrol stations and those sort of things located too far. They tend to be on the fringes, and I think that it's always worth being ahead of the curve. And for what it's worth, I think petrol stations will be the banks of 5 years' time.
Well, electric cars are coming in. These sites are in town centres. Yes, there's contaminated land, but you just build into your numbers, and not a lot of developers are going to want to touch petrol stations because of all these issues. But once we've done one or two and we understand all the costs, and we'll take an investor along the journey with us, so they'll benefit in the longer play. But my plan is really to be building in the next 2 years sort of 200 flats a year out of this new build concept. And it's not that we're becoming a builder, it's that we're going to become a flat pack specialist, if you like. So I can take semi-skilled guys and skilled labourers and teams that I work with. And then my long-term plan is to build a manual that will be able to sell, basically franchise this model onto other sort of smaller builders and other SME developers in their own towns, and they can start improving their own town centres. So it will be a good way to try and help with the housing crisis.
So from PD to beyond.
PD, definitely PD. I mean, you can't buy these banks. The PD is perfect for banks and for big real estate in prime locations that you can easily carve up within sort of 56 days or 58 days, whatever it is. Get it done, get building and get out in a year. And that's really good. But once you start doing that and we start looking at the new build stuff, my hypothesis is that it's going to be a lot easier. We're going to be able to come in, bulldoze the site, bang up the new frame, get the electrics and plumbing done, get all the kitchens done to a nice spec, and then hold them in blue towns and cities and forward sell them to social housing providers in the labour parts of the country, which need more housing for other people. So we're trying to sort of forward think for what's coming up with the general election this year.
Stuart, that's been inspirational. You've had a wonderful journey. Just share with our viewers and listeners just one tip to be a successful property developer over the next year or so.
I think one tip I would take away from this is to understand that a mortgage is an asset. And if you're not paying the mortgage and you've got a tenant who's servicing that debt and you can make a few pennies on top, realise that we're printing more money than we've ever printed before. Understand how much £1 trillion is. Literally Google what is £1 trillion versus £1 million and see visually how much money that is. And if you look at what they're doing now, and now we're up to a 4-year cycle where they're going to have to print more money to service the interest on the payments that they've remade, that there's only one way house prices are going to go. Whether it's this year or in 5 years' time, understand that mortgages are an asset. Get as many mortgages, get yourself as good debt as possible would be my advice, and let money printing erode away that debt. This is what I would suggest.
That's basically the bottom line: to buy to hold, really.
Buy to hold, yeah, absolutely.
And rather than buying ready-built stock, all we're talking about is buy an undervalued asset and convert it to the use class that makes sense, which is residential.
Makes sense of the day.
And then that becomes how you play the money game that you've rightly articulated.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much, Stuart. You've been wonderful, and see you guys in the next podcast. Catch you then.